Hey, good morning, friends. Today is Wednesday, April the 30th, 2025, and the time now is 7:37 a.m. So, friends, I want to talk briefly about Cuba. I want to talk specifically about the friendship between Cuba and Vietnam, the solidarity between Cuba and Vietnam. So, this is just a brief statement just to highlight something that happened recently, in recent time, or something that is actually happening now. So, friends, this is the first video of Cuba, or about Cuba, or for Cuba. Now, friends, recently, or we can say this week, the vice president of Cuba made a trip to Vietnam. And in the trip, he visited venues in Vietnam, including a museum. So honestly, I did not know how strong the relationship between Cuba and Vietnam has been, at least for the past 50 years or so. So, friends, the vice president of Cuba visited Vietnam and even attended an event which commemorated 50 years of Vietnamese struggle for independence and Vietnamese fight against US imperialism. Basically, Vietnam's fight for liberation. And we are talking about its interaction with the United States in the Vietnam War, or during the Vietnam War era. And as part of the trip, the vice president of Cuba, he also visited a museum which basically focus or house history or so about the Vietnam War and the atrocity, as the Vietnamese sees it, that the Americans, the United States, caused, okay, or carried out upon the Vietnamese people. Both Vietnam and Cuba are communist countries, or countries that used to be communist or ran by communists. And they both were part of the struggle for both their own liberation and international liberation. But Cuba, as a fighting force against imperialism, goes way back. And after the Cuban Revolution, the Cuba as a fighting force against imperialism and colonialism was very strong. The Cuban even sent troops to Angola to fight against the South Africans, okay, the apartheid regime in South Africa, which invaded Angola. Cuba actually defeated South Africa in Angola. Cuba has been the one country that continued to aid many countries around the world, at least in current times, so much so in the field of medicine. I remember, friends, in 2010, when we had the earthquake in Haiti, Cuba is one such country, even among the rich and powerful country, as Cuba, as poor as it is, as much as Cuba has been starved, okay, and battered by the United States economically. Cuba sent doctors and rescuers to Haiti to aid in fighting the aftermath, okay, or combating the aftermath of the earthquake in Haiti. So Cuba is one of those glorious countries in the world that continues to do more, continues to do big things with less, okay, with limited resources, finance, economic resources. So I'm very happy the fact that both Cuba and Vietnam continue to strengthen their bilateral ties, their relationship. In just April, there was also a visit, and also I think January this year, you have exchange of officials. You have the Cuban officials visit Vietnam, and Vietnamese officials recently, even in April this year, 2025, visited Cuba. So I'm happy to see both countries continue to go at it. But for Cuba, Cuba is one such country that is in the minds and hearts of many around the world, whether we are talking about Africa, the Latin America, Caribbean, and so on. Cuba is one of those countries that have less but continues to do more, and the rest of the world does have a very strong positive opinions of Cuba, despite the fact that, in the eyes of Western media and government, Cuba as a country and Cuba as a government, okay, continues to be disrespected and projected or portrayed to the rest of the world as the bad country that no one, no country, no institutions around the world should interact with. But for Cuba, I'm very happy that they continue to do big things. Now, friends, if you're watching my video for the first time or if you're new to this channel, this is how the channel is set up. Every prominent international institution in the world does have at least one playlist on this channel. However, every country in the world has at least two playlists on this channel. One is the country's name and the other is domestic the country's name. For example, the country's name playlist will feature videos, talks, programs, or ideas that focus specifically on the country's interaction with other countries in its region and around the world. In this case, the country's name playlist or the playlist Cuba will feature videos, talks, programs, or ideas that focus specifically on Cuban interaction, relations, diplomatic activities with other countries in its region in the Caribbean, seas, in Latin America, in the Americas, and the rest of the world. However, domestic Cuba playlist will focus on videos, talks, programs, or ideas that are specifically about the current situation, domestic situation in Cuba. In this case, we are talking about employment, academics, finance, economics, culture, and so on and so on and so on. Now, friends, please tell me what you think, and I really want to know what you think. But friends, I'm going to end here. I want to thank you for being a member of the Echoing Voice community, my friends. But most especially and most importantly, or most important, I want to thank you a lot for watching the Echoing Voice. Peace.